Canadians had never particularly worried about their country's sovereignty over this immense territory occupied by the Inuit. But since the ice has started melting, Canada has grown much more vigilant. It's the end of October in the village of Kugluktuk. Time seems suspended as locals await the change of seasons. This wait has become longer with each passing year. The waters of the Northwest Passage are only partly in winter's icy grip, as if the gods themselves can't decide on its future. A select group of travelers are about to set off on a voyage of discovery. They're specialists in Canadian law and politics. The newly navigable waters of the Arctic pose a unique diplomatic challenge. Canada must convince the rest of the world that it owns the legendary Northwest Passage. The Amundsen has just left Kugluktuk near the western end of the Northwest Passage, heading for Iqaluit. This voyage will take the scientists through Bellot Strait and the Fox Basin. At this latitude, the waters are often obstructed by ice.
There's no ice in the Northwest Passage. This is very significant. When it's blocked with ice, foreign ships can't enter Canadian waters. Yet today, anyone can come through. We have only a few icebreakers and little else as means of protecting the country. I'm very upset because it's clear that we must, as a country, take immediate steps to protect Canadian sovereignty over the area.
Despite names they're very familiar with, this is the first time these specialists have actually come to these straits and sounds, although they know only too well their strategic importance.
We left from Kugluktuk. Given that we were on an icebreaker, the ice conditions didn't bother us. We'll continue on our way and we'll pass south of Cambridge Bay and Victoria Strait. From that point on, we'll run into ice that's several years old, but not all that concentrated. If all goes well, by the end of the day tomorrow, we'll be entering Bellot Strait.
We do a lot of our work from our Vancouver or Montreal offices. What was missing was a first-hand look, and I think that now will be all the more convincing.
In Nova Scotia, another contingent of the Canadian Arctic Patrol prepares for a mission. CFB Greenwood is home to 14 Wing and the large Aurora aircraft that patrol our eastern frontier from the United States all the way to Baffin Island. Canada has 18 Auroras based in British Columbia and here in Nova Scotia. This morning, Commander Lisa Reimer and her team are getting ready for a 12-hour mission in the icy north.
We'll go Greenwood, direct Sept-Îles, direct Kuujjuaq, direct Pond Inlet, and that's where we'll go operational, and then we'll recover in Iqaluit. And then we'll recover off the Iqaluit 090 degree radial at 50 miles, which is basically where we enter Iqaluit's control, or the controlled airspace around Iqaluit.
The Aurora is a long-distance plane, ideal for maritime patrols. It was conceived primarily as an anti-submarine patrol aircraft, but is also used for fishing patrols, as well as general reconnaissance missions over the area.
On an Arctic flight, the aircraft respond a lot differently in the cold. They take a lot more attention. You have to pay attention to warming up the airplane. It's capable of doing the job, and it operates at high altitudes, and it's cold up there all the time. So once it's running, it's a good bird. We do quite a regular and thorough inspections on everything. If you know where the problems are and you can head them off and do preventative maintenance, sometimes she gets the better of us, but she's a good airplane.
The Aurora was developed from a former passenger plane, the Lockheed Electra. The Canadian Auroras are used for anti-submarine patrols and carry sonar-equipped submersible buoys on their Arctic surveillance missions.
We carry hydrophones, microphones dropped from the plane with a transmitter that floats on the surface as the hydrophone sinks to a preset underwater depth. This lets us hear any passing submarines. All this appears in graphic form on our computer screens, allowing us to closely follow submarine activity.
So the microphone will deploy into the water and send a signal back to the aircraft. My job as an acoustic sensor operator is to interpret the signal that comes back and figure out basically what's going on in the water.
The Sovereignty Patrol lets us know exactly where everyone is, while letting them know we're there as well. If the territory isn't regularly patrolled, and if outsiders think we aren't occupying it, then they start thinking maybe they have a right to it. So it's really a question of letting them know that this is ours. This is our country.
After 2 days of sailing, the Amundsen finally reaches a stretch of solid ice. The scientists on board can now begin their work. Suzanne Lalonde specializes in international law at the University of Montreal. She knows that Canada's position in this matter is delicate.
I'm part of a project with Professor Michael Byers from the University of British Columbia, which is studying the extent of Canadian sovereignty over the Arctic waters, in terms of the political, judicial, and diplomatic ramifications. Since 1986, we've taken a strong legal position on this matter, in which we deem all waters within the Arctic archipelago to be Canadian territorial waters. Territorial waters are basically like land. That is, we fully control access to them and our rules and regulations apply. The American position is in direct opposition to this. Our quarrel with them is largely over traffic through the Arctic archipelago.
Canadian territory has a limit of 12 nautical miles along its borders, including those in the Arctic. This isn't being contested, although the status of the Northwest Passage is. No other region of Canada has as much history as the Northwest Passage. Hundreds of explorers lost their lives there, seeking a shorter route between Europe and Asia. The route taken by Roald Amundsen about 100 years ago is the best known way through the Canadian Arctic Archipelago, although there are other possible routes depending on ice conditions. Because of the thickness of the ice, very few ships used to risk the passage. As such, the question of sovereignty or control over these waters was never really at issue. That changed about 40 years ago, when the Americans sent one of their supertankers, the Manhattan, through the passage without first seeking permission. The message was clear. Despite any Canadian pretensions to the contrary, these were international waters. Peter Liotta is a former United States Air Force pilot and currently teaches at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island.
On the surface, it was just shown it could be done. The other suggestion is the United States Navy is at that time, and quite frankly still is, a blue water Navy. It could go anywhere at any time.
From that point on, Canada has made it clear that the waters of the passage are theirs. As such, Canadian laws and regulations apply. Still, the government remains cautious. A confrontation with the Americans is the last thing Canada wants. Professor Franklin Griffiths thinks that's a wise approach.
This issue of who has rights in the Northwest Passage is not a live issue. It's a back burner issue. And in my view, if we were careful, we could get it not only off the back burner, off the stove, but out of the kitchen altogether. So it would cease to be a major irritant and also a discouragement to Canada cooperation with the United States in particular in the Arctic.
Despite this stance, most Canadian researchers working in the Arctic believe it's urgent that the country adopt a firmer political position on the region.
The question of who controls the Northwest Passage is extremely important. What we need to do is convince the international community that we're in a position to defend our interests and to defend our territorial waters. Because if we aren't able to demonstrate that ability, no one will take us seriously, and no one will respect our legal rights over the area.
The government of Nunavut believes that Canada should speak out loud and clear on this issue.
Canada has a role to play in Arctic sovereignty, but also in the circumpolar world. The Canadian government needs to be active in the Arctic, not just during July and August and the summer months, but indeed for 12 months of the year.
Canada faces some daunting challenges, convincing other nations that it is ready, willing, and able to back up its position on this issue, showing that it can provide efficient navigational assistance, control pollution, and have intervention and ice-breaking teams available to provide clear passage throughout the better part of the year. Canada has already taken key steps to demonstrate that these waters belong to it. Two Canadian explorers, Captains Joseph Elzéar Bernier and Henry Larson, claimed the passage on behalf of their country. But that was a very long time ago. Since then, there has been more than a century of relative indifference. However, now that the ice has started to melt, opening up new maritime routes, memory is reviving among Canadian politicians. To help other countries fully understand that the Arctic is part of our territory, Canadians must establish a presence there. But it is a thinly populated area. Innovative steps were required. Since 2003, the Rangers, an Inuit militia, have been manning sovereignty patrols in the area on snowmobiles, leaving large flags across the far north. They make their way to areas where no one lives and where few travelers ever venture. It's all a question of establishing a visible presence. Whether or not there's ice, winter visibility will gradually decline. In 2 weeks, the Northwest Passage will be plunged into total darkness. The Amundsen will doubtless be the last ship to come through here this year. The route is impassable between November and July, even with the strongest of the Canadian icebreakers.
The simple fact of pack ice alters the coastline, hiding potential dangers and making it difficult for radar to determine what's ice and what's the actual coast. Bellow Strait becomes a critical passage, a true thread-the-needle challenge that requires the right conditions to make it through. Traditionally, people are stuck here for many days, waiting for the necessary conditions, for weather, ice, and water to align.
In the middle of the Northwest Passage is Bellow Strait, a narrow stretch of water that serves as a useful shortcut for navigators. Most of the time, this passage is obstructed by ice. Only an icebreaker can open a narrow pathway for ships through the icy buildup. But not today. With conditions like these, water pretty much unobstructed by ice at the end of October, any modern ship can manage the crossing. Several ships have done so in recent years, some without even advising the Canadian authorities of their presence. If the warming of Arctic waters continues, maritime traffic will surely increase. Canada is running out of time.
This is the Northwest Passage, 22nd of October. It's wide open to the world. Well, what we have here is a waterway that does not have the protection that we historically have had. Usually we had lots of ice, thick, hard ice that protected our sovereignty. The protection is gone. The ice is gone. We might not even know if a foreign ship came through here because we do not have the surveillance capabilities. There is no police force here. There are no soldiers. The Coast Guard is only here very occasionally. We need to protect this waterway so that any ship that comes through is subject to our regulation and our control. This is Canada, and we have almost nothing here. And it is open to the rest of the world now because of the melting ice to come and take advantage of our vulnerability.
One other Arctic nation understands Canada's unique challenges. The Russian Arctic has a similar passage, in this case, the Northeast Passage. The Russians call it their waterway to the north and use it to supply their cities in Siberia, as well as their oil and natural gas industries. Several million tons of various products are transported this way each year. They still need their nuclear-powered icebreakers to make it through, however, even during the summer months. In terms of international law, this maritime route to the north has the same status as our Northwest Passage. Both are considered international channels.
The problem with the Northwest Passage is similar to the Russians' Northeastern Passage. What we've recently done is set up a kind of non-commercial partnership to deal with any questions or issues that arise. And we've invited different nations to become part of it. Little by little, we're educating them, warming them up to the idea that this northern passage belongs to the Russians.
Although Canada is using diplomacy to convince other countries of the legitimacy of its position, Vladimir Putin's Russia has taken a much firmer stand.
We reaffirm our sovereignty over the Northeastern Passage, and we are preparing legal claims which will firmly establish this passage and all its surrounding northern territories as Russian possessions. As for Canada, we strongly urge you to follow our example. We are open to consulting with you on the matter. We are aware that Canada is a nation with a sizable Arctic presence.
It is a big airplane, but it handles really nicely. We get good performance. It handles really sharply at low level. There's conditions such as whiteout that we have to be very wary of. That's when you have a white surface on the ground as well as white overcast. You have to be very cautious of losing your perception, and that would be one of the big things up in the north. The other thing would be there's a lot of high terrain there, so we fly in close to the land, and so we just have to be very aware of where we are at all times. Those are probably the two big hazards of flying up north.
The Aurora carries a crew of 11. The operations specialist is located at the rear of the craft.
On the Aurora, we operate the radar. We watch for land and traffic avoidance. When we're low level, we have like inshore operations and just keep the pilots aware of any weather. That's when we're doing radar, that's one of the big issues. We watch for weather. We want to avoid any storms. Sometimes it's just more like sovereignty, kind of, just the presence of the Canadian military up north.
The 12-hour flight under Arctic conditions is demanding. The three pilots have their hands full.
For the crew, we're just heading into a contact here, just to do a photo and visual ID of this contact. Roger.
This aircraft allows us to maintain a presence in the north, while also enabling us to set down to carry out patrols. We could fly for 12 hours without refueling, which lets us cover a lot of territory and generally keep an eye on what's going on.
When there's a lot going on, but poor visibility, Eric Tabard's knowledge and experience can prove crucial.
These are my controls. They enable us to fly anywhere in Canada, even in the far north, without relying on ground instrumentation. These are my two main systems, which also send information forward to the pilot. So I guess I'm a pretty busy guy. Since I'm the plane's eyes and ears, as well as being responsible for our position and letting the pilots know exactly where they are at all times. A few months ago, we were sent on a patrol to the far north for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We discovered a fleet of European boats that weren't supposed to be there. So for a while, the plane circled, keeping a close eye on exactly what they were up to. Ultimately, the ship's home country was called by Fisheries and Oceans Canada, informing them that a permit was required to fish in Canadian waters and that a quota system was strictly enforced.
We have equipment that enables us to listen under the ice, letting us know if any submarines are passing through the area. The surveillance plane's tail houses a powerful magnetic disturbance detector. When a submarine, which invariably emits its own magnetic energy, passes under the ice, these magnetic fluctuations can be detected through even the thickest ice. Aircraft remain, in my opinion, the most effective way to patrol the far north. Because it isn't just a question of patrolling a geographic area, but also of meeting its people, since we land in some pretty remote little settlements. As such, I think it's crucial that we not only have this aerial presence in the far north, but an interactive human one as well.
In October 2006, ice coverage in the Northwest Passage was around 24%. By comparison, the average over the previous 10 years was almost 44%. For the Americans, the changing climate represents a security problem. They are seeking freedom of movement to defend an area adjoining their territory.
There are two contradictory American positions. On the one hand, they want the security of a restricted Northwest Passage. On the other, they want all worldwide maritime routes left open so they can move their naval forces without restriction to wherever they're needed throughout the world.
The United States considers Northwest Passage to be a strait, just as the Strait of Hormuz, Straits of Malacca, and we'll probably continue to press that. As we spoke of the Manhattan earlier, it's also proving that it could be done. It's also sending a signal about the United States' dominance, and quite frankly, a military arm is an expression of that.
It took the Amundsen 8 days to go from Kugluktuk to Iqaluit. Only a couple of hours were spent trapped in the ice. 20 years earlier, the same trip would have taken twice as long, since the boat would have had to deal with days and days of ice-caused delays. The melting of the ice cap is ushering in a new era of commercial trade between East and West. As in the day of its initial discovery, the Northwest Passage has awakened the greed of competing shipping companies from many countries. The more eager they become to use it, the less impact Canada's diplomatic voice will have at the international table.
The Canadian Coast Guard has always had a very active presence. That will continue for years to come, to be sure. Our place is here. We must continue to vigilantly care for the Arctic, and we should take whatever steps are necessary to be able to do so effectively.
Well, what Canada would have to do is move, first of all, towards a diplomatic approach to increased cooperation about potential accessions, about coming together rather than making this an issue of antagonism. That's a diplomatic, political move, but I think that's the real solution.
The opening of this passage marks the end of an era and the start of a period of uncertainty for Canadian interests in the region.
What we need to make sure of and ascertain is that our federal partner, the Canadian government, maintains that sovereignty link, but also to ensure that any type of development is controlled for the benefit of Nunavut.
If this can happen here, if the end of October there can be no ice in the Northwest Passage, that means that climate change is real. It's happening faster than any politician will admit. We're going to try to do everything that we can. It's absolutely crucial that we have an interdisciplinary effort to understand this and then to take it forward, to educate the public, to educate politicians, and to make something serious happen before it's too late.
At the moment, the threat to Canadian territory is minimal. In the Arctic, it's understandably difficult to keep a truly close eye on things, particularly since we don't always patrol when the passage is open. Yet, without patrols, how sure can we be? When we speak of threats, we aren't implying military acts of aggression. It's more a question of sovereignty and our basic right to know just who might happen to be crossing our turf.
The mission is over. The Amundsen and the Aurora make a stopover for refitting at Iqaluit. In the coming years, surveillance activities and establishing a general military presence in the Arctic will surely increase. The Canadian government is presently constructing 8 new patrol boats, able to navigate through ice as thick as a meter. They will help protect the Northwest Passage, at least in the summer.